What is going on, YouTube? Listen, today I wanted to talk about what some people consider to be the most confusing, the most nonsensical, the most unintuitive part of Street Fighter gameplay. Now, I'm not talking about footsies or crush counters or anti-airs or anything like that. I'm, of course, talking about juggles. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about juggles, and that's, of course, because Twitter inspired me to do this. Take content from Twitter, redistribute it, repackage it for YouTube. That is what you do. Ben Pace here had this meme here, and I do love the American Psycho memes that have had a resurgence. I'm a big fan.
That's simply not possible. Why isn't it possible? It's just not. Why not, you stupid bastard?
I kind of love this meme format. I'm a bit of a sucker for it. But basically, you know, it's showing the Sagat combo, the V-Trigger 1 Tiger Cannon combo, and he goes to continue the juggle after the two Tiger Cannons with the V-Skill 1 enhanced DP right there, and lo and behold, it doesn't juggle. But why isn't it possible? That's actually a really technical question. Why is it not possible? And actually, it was pretty interesting to see people's responses to this meme. The hardest thing about playing 99% of 2D fighters is juggle limits, and that's why I played exclusively Tekken for like a year and a half a while ago. I don't miss, so why come my juggle failed? Because no. Biggest gripe with Street Fighter V and the Street Fighter series in general is how they prevent shit from connecting for literally no reason. That's what Tekken and Smash do way better. Yeah, juggle points are pretty stupid, probably better off with a gravity system like checks notes. Every other life bar fighter that isn't Street Fighter. And these responses, these were not just from people who are beginners at Street Fighter and not familiar with the game. Some of these are from very advanced high-level players. It actually was pretty interesting to see how many people saw that meme, and instead of just laughing, they were like, yeah, this is what I don't like about Street Fighter. I don't like the fact that sometimes when they're in the air, my move will just pass through their body and it doesn't connect. But sometimes, miraculously, when they're in the air, I press a certain move and it connects. But then if I do this in a different order, then it doesn't connect. What's the deal? Why is this so confusing? And, you know, they're right. Tekken is a lot more straightforward with the juggles. However, it's not that straightforward as I think the middle commenter is making it out to be. There is a structure and a rule system to the Tekken juggle system. Smash, yeah, everything hits. There's a lot more under the hood that makes the juggle system more complex, like DI and how that all influences the combo game and what's a true combo and what's not. So that can actually get pretty complex, but on the surface level, it's pretty straightforward, right? It's like if they're floating in the air in front of you, most likely if your move will actually show the fist, the kick, the whatever connecting with their body, it generally works. Other games do this as well, maybe not as graceful as you might hope, but you know, you look at good old Mortal Kombat. I always thought this was kind of strange for my Street Fighter palette. You know, my palette for fighting games is totally defined by Street Fighter. Just having jabs like that juggle in the air, it always seemed very foreign to me. But for people who are used to those kind of games, this is good. You know, this is what makes sense to them. They're floating in the air, everything juggles. If you can hit them in time, then it'll work. It might not be optimal, might not be the best combo route, but it'll work, right? So some people kind of prefer those types of systems, where in Street Fighter, for sure, it would not allow you to juggle jabs multiple times like that in the corner. Very rarely do you get a juggle state where you're able to get a jab at all. It's pretty rare and very limited, and you wouldn't be able to get more than one. Now, I'm not going to really talk about the actual mechanics behind the juggles. If you want to know more about that, I can't recommend this video enough. This video by James Chen on the Ultra Chen TV channel is actually amazing. I watched this recently just as a primer to see what he discussed about the Street Fighter juggle system. This breaks down exactly how the Street Fighter juggle systems work, the history of it, when it was introduced, how it's evolved over the years, and will make reading patch notes make sense for a lot of people. So this video, 10 out of 10. I'm going to link this video in the description. You guys should really check it out if you want to understand how the juggle system worked. And he gets into the modern examples and shows how combos work and everything like that. But I wanted to talk a bit about sort of the intentionality behind these things and how this influences gameplay and why I kind of like this system. But I can also understand why people wouldn't, right? It's one of the most ambiguous and hard to grasp and unintuitive portions of the game. It's very hidden from the player, right? So people tend to not like mechanics that are not intuitive up front. It's one of the biggest problems that fighting games have, is that the skill involved in something is often many layers removed, right? You cannot see what you're actually trying to learn. So I wanted to show a few examples actually of these juggle systems, and we'll talk about the first one we just saw. So we saw with the meme, we saw Sagat over here doing this here combo. So we got the V trigger, the 2 cannons, and then there we go, Tiger uppercut. It happens to whiff right there at the end, of course. The meme's not wrong. It doesn't work. Even with the V skill 1 enhancement behind the DP, you don't get the extra juggle points in order to make it work. However, it's not like you don't have options. Let's try a few different variations of how this can work. There you go. In this combo, if you use both Tiger shots or both Tiger cannons, if you spin the bar, it'll connect. EX allows you to juggle after this combo, and actually it does a grip of damage. It does 400 damage. 400 damage. That is a ton of damage for 1 bar. It does use her whole V trigger, but it's from a stand medium kick. If you play against a guy, you know that this poke is dangerous, especially when he has Tiger Cannon behind it. It's one of the most abusable normals in the game. Normally, it doesn't lead to any damage except when he has V trigger, right? So it becomes extremely dangerous in this scenario. Other options you have here: just don't do the second Tiger Cannon. If you cut the combo short and only do 1 Tiger Cannon, you still have enough juggle points in order to go into the DP, right? So it might not be intuitive to know that if you juggle twice with the cannon, you can't go into a non-meter DP. But you actually have an option here once you understand Sagat's juggle system, which comes primarily, which is the downside, from trial and error. You eventually understand what moves put you in juggle states where you can't juggle many things after. And this is what James Chen describes in that video very well. It describes how the juggle states are basically, as you continue to add more hits into the combo when they're in the air, it increases the juggle value. The higher the juggle value you have during a combo, the less likely a move is going to be allowed to juggle after, basically. Certain moves can almost always juggle at the end of combos. Certain moves you have to do early on in combos. There's a bit more nuance to that. I'll let James Chen handle it. But once you get a feel for it, you understand which moves kind of put you in those juggle states where you have to wrap up the combo, which moves are good to end juggles with, and which moves you need to do early on in a combo. But it is all trial and error. Now, why would they do something like this? Well, say you have V trigger, V skill, and super. 544 damage. If the moon and the stars align for Sagat and he lands that medium kick with all these resources, he's going to do a ton of damage, right? Now, imagine if he also could include that second Tiger Cannon in this combo. Because of the juggle state limitation of this combo, if he uses both Tiger Cannons, he can't do the heavy punch DP into super here. He has to spend a bar. So you can see how, because it forces you to burn resources, it doesn't allow him to get like this obscene amount of damage. So one thing that you can consider with the way the juggles are structured is balance. It's a balancing decision. Maybe they didn't want him to get 600 damage from a medium kick with all these resources. Maybe that was part of the balancing for the character. If instead you go a different route, you actually get less damage. You can do both of these and then do raw super. It does less damage than just doing the 1 cannon into the DP into super. But you have options to go into this. So essentially what I'm trying to get at is it's not always limited because the developers just don't want you to have fun. Sometimes limitations are put there on purpose to force you to start burning resources so you can't potentially do a combo into a CA cancel, right? Like maybe they don't want you to do this full extended juggle, then do a special move, and then still have all the full bar to go into CA. Maybe they want you to choose do the special move, do the CA, or burn EX. You can't have it every way. That's a very common balancing decision that goes into with these juggle systems. And yes, it is very unintuitive. I do think that they should make this much more available to the player, or like describe it some way in the UI, like maybe have the juggle counter along with the combo counter. But to say that, you know, this should just allow everything to juggle, I don't think that's necessarily the right answer. Street Fighter has this system where they kind of design the combos to work in a certain way, and so that you have to choose certain routes and you have a more limited tree of options as you do combos, but that forces you to have awareness of those juggle options and to be able to go between them. I do think it should be more readily available or more visual with the UI for new players to learn, but it's definitely a skill in and of itself to learn these juggles. Like, for example, Oro. Oro is one of the most juggle friendly characters in the game, but there is a lot to learn when you start juggling with this character, especially if you add the Tengu stones behind it. Like, the amount of juggling you have to do with this V trigger is pretty ridiculous, and you have to learn like all these routes and like what continues from what. So how are you supposed to know that combos? The answer is you don't without trial and error. I had to learn that combo and start to understand intuitively the routes you should go down and how these juggles worked through trial and error, right? For example, if I do heavy DP, it's gonna quickly start limiting my juggle options. So I can do one heavy DP, do another, but I can't do three, right? And if I do something like heavy DP, light DP, I can't do medium DP after. But if I just go light, medium, heavy, I can just go up the ladder in terms of the strengths. So there's actually a recommended order to the juggles, because heavy DP quickly limits your juggle potential. You want to delay when you go into the heavy DP as far as possible. However, at the same time, you know, you wouldn't necessarily want to use the lower juggle potential moves early, because you're losing out on damage, and then they don't juggle into each other as well because they have a lower juggle count. Once again, referencing that James Chen video, check it out. But basically, I had to go through all this trial and error to figure out the way I should structure these juggles and how I should tack things on. And yeah, of course, you figure out over time that no matter what, at the end of a juggle, with Oro especially, you want to tack on that EX DP at the end. EXDP is like your juggle finisher. It is the tried and true. It is your safe finisher for juggle combos with Oro, because you know it's going to work. But I would be lying if I said that I didn't miss juggle combos and misunderstand the juggle potential and have moves just face the opponent. But through trial and error, I started to figure out the way it's structured. And it gets pretty complex. This almost cost me a tournament round recently. You know, his EX Tatsu with the launcher, it gives you juggle combos. That's the whole point of this EX move, is to let you juggle, right? And the way you juggle from this is also very different depending on the distance, right? There's a lot of factors. You do certain moves depending on how far away it hit. And on top of that, things can get a little funky. If they are airborne, like say when they backdash, suddenly this move does not work. So not only is the juggle potential different for every move, it's modified based on if it hits them out of the air or not, right? And the order it hits them in. So if I hit them with this from the ground, it's all good. If I hit them with this towards medium out of the air, suddenly I can't do my normal combo route. What you have to do is you have to cut your combo short and go instantly into a DP, because that has a higher juggle potential. If you can't recognize this on the fly, like you pick them up out of a backdash, you go for this, you're gonna drop your combo. That happened to me in tournament, in a top 8 of a big tournament. I didn't recognize that I hit him out of a backdash. I went into my basic B&B and it dropped, and I almost lost the round from that scramble when they were like a pixel away from dying. All I had to do is DP, right? But that was my lack of awareness of how his combos are structured and the juggle system. If I was more prepared, more in the zone, I would have recognized that and done the proper combo. Is it intuitive? No, I'll give you that. That said, I do really enjoy the way juggles work in Street Fighter games. I feel like when they allow free juggles in games, sometimes they can get very janky looking combos. Eventually it gets optimized, like you look at a Marvel game or Tekken, they get optimized and look very cool. But if they just allowed free juggles in Street Fighter, I feel like it would look pretty bad. And I think there's a different skill set involved with understanding the juggle system and being able to identify, based on the situation you hit the opponent in, observe your resources, observe the state they were hit in, and confirming that into a full combo. I like that skill in Street Fighter, and I feel like that's one of the biggest skills in Street Fighter 5 is juggle awareness. You have to really understand the combo system, and you're rewarded for doing so. Some people were complaining that the Street Fighter 5 juggles were too limited, and I made a whole video about it, complaining about how Street Fighter 5 Ryu just doesn't have the juggles. And the developers, I think they listened. They added this in the final balance patch. Light punch DP, juggle to EX fireball. Something that I made a whole video about, like how this should juggle. Prior to the final balance patch, this did not work. These juggles did not work. They limited the juggle state too much, where after an early light DP, you couldn't hit them at all after. There is a downside to it. If the developers get too restrictive like they've done in the past with Street Fighter 5, it's definitely both unintuitive and just limiting, but I don't mind having conscious developer choice in the way the combos are structured for juggles if done well. I feel like Oro, especially as a character, is done extremely well because you have a lot of freedom with the juggles, but there are still definitely defined rules that you have to master. So that allows a person who's mastered Oro to look much more competent and have a lot more damage from their conversions with the character because they know the system so well. That said, guys, I just wanted to talk about juggles in Street Fighter. I thought it was pretty interesting to see so many people complaining about the system because it's something that I take for granted at this point. My sensibilities for fighting games are based around this system. I played other games, DBFZ, Marvel, and Tekken a bit, and yeah, the freedom is a little shocking at first, to be honest. It's a little weird that you have to kind of choose the optimal route from an infinite number of bad options, really, to eventually whittle that down to a competent combo route. But that said, let me know what you think about juggles in Street Fighter. Is this a bad system? Should the developers try to change this up? Is it too unintuitive? Do you have any ideas what they can do to make this easier to learn for players and more visually accessible, maybe in the UI or something like that? If you have any ideas, I'd love to hear it in the comments, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.